Buongiorno. Last final full day of the trip. Very, very long day ahead, very busy day ahead. Let's get started. As usual, here's breakfast to get us going this morning. I got a pineapple yogurt, a donut that's got some kind of custard filling, a couple of selections of meats, some watermelon, then some grapefruit juice and some mixed fruit juice. Adding on to my breakfast, they just put out some hot, yummy scrambled eggs and some more pieces of hot dog. So needless to say, Ty would be very thrilled with the breakfast at this hotel. Ty loves all things hot dog, even for breakfast. Right here, you've got the Teatro Marcello, old ancient times theater, dramedy and comma. Then up top there, you can see what is known as the Wedding Cake Monument. We're not heading over to the Wedding Cake Monument right now, but we're gonna head down into the ruins over here by the theater. Currently just making a walk through many of the ancient ruins down here.
It's a really cool area as well to have
Currently in the Jewish ghetto.
One of the typical traditional foods from Rome
October 16th,
is
1943.
They are really amazing.
The Jewish members of the community were sent
I'm
to
going to show you,
concentration
just in
camps.
case you want to come back.
Last day, best day on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Last day, best day! We are back at the Pantheon. Yesterday, the line was so long, we just didn't feel like waiting in it with all the walking that we had already done. So look, there's really no line whatsoever to get inside the Pantheon today. So Dougie and I are gonna do this first thing during our free time. So I'll show you guys inside. All right, we are inside the Pantheon. Show you guys around. You can tell it's not too crowded in here, which is really nice. I'm sure yesterday it was packed full of folks because of what the line looked like all throughout the day. We are here a little earlier this morning than we came by yesterday because it is not even quite 10 o'clock yet. So we have a little bit of time. I do think that post-COVID here, there are more stanchions up. I don't remember there being such massive stanchions in the middle of the Pantheon. You could kind of walk freely, and now they have you going around in a particular direction. Zoom in on the altar for you guys. You can see a better view. I can't get any closer because of the stanchion. Just go a little above view here from this direction. Try not to go too fast because Jess always gets angry at me. On over to the other side. Got a good straight on shot right here. Umberto. We have some audio guides over here you could get to walk around with. But that pretty much sums up and completes our little mini walk around tour here of the Pantheon. Now to get back with Doug and see where we head to next. Here's another exterior shot of the Pantheon. Wanted to be able to put this up here so you guys could see the dome on top of it there. You got Betty Boop in the windowsill here.
Cold record.
Pretty cool sighting. Is that Frank the Pug? Men in Black. Next stop brings us to one of the official stores of AS Roma, the official football team of Rome. We made it back to the Fountain de Trevi, the Trevi Fountain. For those of y'all that watched yesterday's video, you saw us here, but they were cleaning it. So we could not do the traditional throwing in of the coin into the fountain. It didn't have the water in it yesterday as well. So let's do the tradition here. Got some space. Give me just a second. For those of you unfamiliar with the tradition, take a coin, you throw it over your left shoulder and make a wish. And you should return to Rome one day. Worked for me. This is trip number 3 here. So give me just a second, let me make my wish. There we go. How about a little chocolate wall here in Vinci for you guys? Shockingly, y'all may have noticed with yesterday's video that we didn't have any gelato.
This chocolate shop, we're about to go ham. There is now a chocolate wall, which is really cool. A fun little feature. You don't see that much in the States. Yeah. I never know how to
First time gelato time. First gelato of the day. This one I got a mix. It's melon and lemon. And then down in the bottom, what looks like chocolate, it's caramel and nuts. And they actually put a really nice piece of dark chocolate on top that is gone because I already ate it and it was delicious. So I think I may have found my new favorite gelato place. This is fantastico. Done with our delicious gelato, and now we're actually walking to find some place to sit down and probably just have a long lunch for most of the remainder of our free time, but just came upon these really worn, awesome looking columns. Got a little lunch going on. Doug got some spaghetti with meatballs and some mushrooms. Got him a Fanta to drink. Got myself some Coke Zero and some fettuccine Alfredo. And then we've got this nice view of the street. The Pantheon is to our right, just down the street, and we are thoroughly enjoying this air conditioning on this very, very, very hot day. Lunch was fantastico. Sitting a little heavy on our bellies right now, but we've passed this building several times in the last few days, and it does have a Caravaggio painting inside, so I think we're gonna head on in and take a look, and I'll get it for you guys. So while it didn't look like it from the outside, as you can tell, this is a basilica. Somewhere in the basilica is an official Caravaggio painting. Caravaggio was different from some of the other famous artists of the time period, he was nowhere near appreciated as much because he used just regular people as his muses. He would use thieves off the street. He would use prostitutes and hookers off the street to represent like Mother Mary and things like that. And so, of course, people at the time thought that was highly offensive and could not understand why he would do such a thing. So it wasn't until well after Caravaggio's time that his work began to be more appreciated. At least here at home in Italy.
Go.
Yeah, okay. My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Be prepared to die.
We've made it to the Colosseum. Last day, last couple big things on the itinerary. We're going to be headed into Colosseum and the Roman Forum. A little bit closer of a view of the Colosseum for you guys. Yeah, we'll be going in, so you'll get to see the interior too.
Have you ever been in a Greek theatre before? You know, semicircular in shape, with a flat side, where the actors were supposed to perform, while the circular area was supposed for the seats, and so for the spectators. This building, when it was conceived, was thought as a kind of a double theatre, two theatres, one facing the other, in order to have an oval-shaped building, actually to pack even more people inside. But at the end of the Roman Empire, it received another name. Who knows what that name was? Colosseum. Great, that was good. How was that? It's because it was believed to be giant, or for another reason. Does anybody know the reason why this building was called like that? You know, closer to its western edge, we're going to pass through later on, was standing a huge bronze statue depicting Emperor Nero as the sun god. That statue, because of its size, was more than 35 meters tall, more or less reaching the third level of this building, was called the Colossus. But at the end of the Roman Empire, because that statue was completely cast in bronze and gilded, covered in gold, was completely melted down, was recast, for casting religious Christian statues, but left the name stuck with this building, and since then became known with the name of the building that was standing close by the Colossus, the Colosseum. Okay? So let's have a look to this building. This building was conceived like a massive cage. As you can see from the external sides, 4 levels high, the lower 3 of which were arcaded all the way around, 80 archways exactly, running all the way around, while the uppermost layer consisted of square windows alternating to large bronze shields hanging from above. Once more, no longer preserved because they have been melted down when the metal was incredibly sought after during the Middle Ages. But why to conceive this massive building that way, with all these archways, rather than, you know, just build a continuous wall like this one, running all the way around with fewer entrances, easier for controlling people accessing it? Why that way? Come on, no one bites.
Cages hold the
Any
slaves.
ideas? Pardon?
Cages hold the slaves.
Well, it's a bit ruthless, but not that far. So, pardon?
Let the noise spread outside.
No, of course, but Probably that one. Well, the first one was to save up material. As you can imagine, more archways and empty, hollow spaces, less material to be employed. The second one was to make it appear slender, more slender than it actually was. But the more important reason was to channel better all spectators that would have flocked in attending the shows by sorting them through the several gates. You know, actually, in antiquity, they worked exactly the same way like they do today, with a double line of iron gates opening and closing at different times in order to sort people according to the social rank. But if you think about it, if passports and identity card did not exist at that time, how did they manage to tell apart a slave from a senator, from a Roman citizen, and so on?
Your clothes.
The clothes. So it was a kind of a dress coding taking place at that time, like if we go to an exclusive club today. And you know why? Because usually a Roman citizen was expected to wear a white tunic and a toga right above it, like I'm going to show you, like this one over here. This was how a Roman citizen was supposed to look like. You know, I tried to wear a toga. It's incredibly complicated. It's so large, you need to wrap yourself several times. And also because pockets were not used at that time. So you use the folds of the tie and the toga to put things inside, and also to wear to cover your hands when there is bad weather. And for example, a slave would look like this, with a tunic usually made up of wool, brown, dark, and so on. A senator was pretty similar to a Roman citizen, but with a purple band, well, basically marking his own clothes. And what about children? Basically, they used to wear tunic. They usually were brightly colored with a specific detail distinguishing. What was it? What do you see? A necklace. They were supposed to be worn up to the major age. They usually came at 17 years old. Even though most of the, especially the, how can I say, the female children, the daughters, usually used to marry at 12, 13 years old. And when they did, usually they devoted those necklaces to the goddess Aphrodite, usually. Okay, so going back to this building, well, basically, have you noticed that on the external side, on top of each archway, there is a number? When entering, when doing the queue outside, by line. Have you noticed that each one archway of the Roman level has got a number on top of it? Oh, yes, in Roman letters. Well, basically, that was the number of each archway. And you know, even though those shows were offered completely for free to all spectators, well, basically, every spectator was given a ticket. A ticket consisting of a terracotta or a wooden piece with 3 numbers carved on top. Well, the first number referred to the number that was located right on top of each archway each spectator was supposed to pass through to get access to this building. The second number referred to the level where those seats were located, and the third number referred to the sector on that level where that specific seat was located, like a modern stadium. But why, if I ask you, why to give a ticket if the entrance was for free? This looks like a waste of material and energy, even though, you know, we're talking about cheap material like wood and terracotta and stuff like that. Why to give a ticket anyway? The entrance was for free.
Keep the classes.
Pardon?
To keep the classes.
Yes, that could be one reason. Come on, lock your brains a bit.
Like the seats.
Pardon?
The seats were taken.
Yes, for a more pragmatic reason. Because by doing so, the mayor of the city, the prefect, Obis, who got a pretty good idea of how many people had been living in town during the days. A sort of temporary census, if you want. Okay? So now let's have a look to how this building worked inside. Let's get closer with white marble. Coming from northern Italy, from Tuscany. So you should imagine this building looking completely total white inside. And now we are exactly what was supposed to be the imperial box. The box where the emperor, along with his family, usually sat inside these kind of large buildings. Of course, as you can imagine, That cross was not standing inside this building when it was used. It has been placed here by the Pope during the 1700s when this building was devoted and dedicated to the Christian martyrs, even though we haven't got any proof that Christians were killed inside this building. We got it from the about the Circus Maximus, but not at all about this building. So, what if I ask you, if you go to a stadium, what would be the best place? Higher up, in the middle. So, how was it that the emperor, that was the most important person, I suppose, was located right here, in the lowest place throughout all the building that could contain between 50 and 80,000 people packed inside? Pardon? Yeah, closer. We're going to see that in a few moments. So, what was the most important reason?
So everyone could see him.
Exactly. Because it was considered a living god. So it was placed this way because it was supposed. Pardon? Oh, sorry, it just surrendered. Gave up. Okay, let's see. Can you hear me? Okay. Pardon?
So everyone could see him.
Because the emperor was a living god. So being in our place was supposed that it was to be seen by everybody inside this building. And also, you know, the sitting places inside actually were regulated and organized, sorted out according through 5 different levels. Here we are. The higher you were supposed to sit, the less important you were supposed to be. The closer to the arena, the more important. Quite the opposite of what we are supposed to do today. Why? Well, the first most obvious reason, visibility. The closer you sat to the arena, the stage where the shows took place, the better the view you got in seeing not only the wild animals, but also the gladiators that were real celebrities fighting closer. The second reason was acoustics. Even though this building was conceived like 2 theaters, one in front of the others, acoustic was not so good. So think of the people sitting right on the 5th layer, where you see that railing up there. They would have experienced and seen just 2 black dots fighting one against the other, without hearing absolutely nothing inside, apart from the applause and the crowd screaming. And the third reason was that the closer you sat to the emperor, the more important you were supposed to be in society, okay? Because it was an honor not only to be in the same place as the emperor was, but above all to be as close as possible to him. So basically, the first level was the lowest one, where you see those marble blocks. Can you see them? I know you are enjoying a little bit of shade. You want to come a little bit closer to whatever part. You can go back in the shade and take a nap if you want. That's okay. And you know, those blocks actually represented the first level and were reserved to the most important people in the Roman Empire, the senators and the magistrates. That level actually ran all the way around this building at the same height. But actually, that's a reconstruction, a replica carried out at the beginning of the 20th century. And it's not properly accurate. Do you know why? Because senators not only would have got marble blocks on top of which to have a seat, they would have got their own marble chair with their own name carved on top of each one. You know, the name of each senator, in fact, was carved in and scripted off every time a senator got into his office and out of it. So as you can imagine, it's pretty important for us to have those names. And we got more or less 200 of those, referring to the last senators, absolutely, that sat down inside this building before it definitely closed down for entertainment. 450 long years after it was officially opened in 80 AD, more or less 2,000 years ago, okay? The second level actually, right above our heads, was reserved to equestrians, high-rank officials, soldiers and merchants. The third level to the middle class, citizens that were sorted according to their profession. We know there was a sector for school teacher, another one for ambassadors, and so on. And progressively to less and less important social classes, up to the very top, the 5th one, where slaves and women were reserved their own seats. And seats consisted not at all of brick and marble, but just of wood. And think that even some people could have been standing during the shows when the building was particularly packed with as recruiters. You know, actually, up here on the very top, there was a section, as I said, devoted only to women. You know why? Because after the first emperor, do you know who the first emperor was, by the way? Octavian Augustus, the first one, the adopted son of Julius Caesar. Well, basically, when that emperor adopted, let's say more or less prudish law, I would say, some sort of, well, to prevent promiscuity in public, women were no longer allowed to share the same seats along with men in this kind of large building for entertainment. And of course, as you can imagine, I'm referring to ordinary women, because as you can imagine, sisters, daughters, wives of wealthy Romans like senators and emperors, of course, will be sitting closer to their husbands, brothers and fathers. But why was that? Why this kind of segregation at that time? Because, you know, in this kind of large buildings, there were internal galleries, like the one we're going to walk through later on. They were pretty dark, and in which happened pretty frequently that prostitutes offered their services. In fact, in Latin slang, they were called fornicaria, from fornicare. You can guess the meaning of. And this was a kind of an attempt by the emperor to try to sort out the problem. I must say, without having the success he expected, actually. And well, this gallery actually, that we could call today a kind of a peanut gallery, basically, was roofed by a kind of a portico running all the way around us. Keep in mind, all running at the same height, more or less 52 meters, like the edge of that wall just in front of you. Because actually, what we experience today, what we see today, is what remains of the building after it was knocked down by an earthquake during the 4th century, during the 5th century, during the 7th century, during the 9th century, during the 11th century, during the 13th century, during the 15th century. And then at last, during the 17th century, was rebuilt all that wall by in order to have a kind of a wall building, all built together. Trying to kind of place itself. So, he located the manual sides and also explosive, but luckily for us, we didn't have success. Okay? Still awake? Yes? Melted down? Okay, so what about the central area? That huge place was the arena. The arena, the stage where the shows took place. And it consisted of a massive wooden platform consisting of several wooden planks. Some scholars think of Lebanese cedar because it was believed to be the longest tree in antiquities. They were fixed together with iron columns and pegs. It was completely covered by yellow sand. You know, today it's used like a kind of a huge frying pan to boil up tourists. And it worked. It worked. And at that time, it was completely covered by yellow sand. Do you know, by the way, how sand was called in Latin? Does anybody know? No? Arena. That's where the name of the platform came from. And can you guess why sand was used? Come on, this is easy. Huh? Easier to clean up. Easier to clean up? Yes, some sort of. Because it was intended to soak up pretty easily the weir, the bloods, from animals and humans to prevent the surface from getting slippery. And also to prevent the stench. Just examples. You know, at the end of the show, it was refreshed by a special team absolutely responsible for cleaning it up. You know, it was actually shielded by a 4 meters tall barrier in order to, there was sustained by Eiffel tasks, as long as we know, as far as we know. Why? In order to prevent wild animals like leopards, cheetahs, and panthers to jump out onto the first seat, because you can imagine what sort of fun it must have been for a senator having a leopard jumping closer to him during the shows to enjoy himself a little bit of that fun. But as far as we know, no such a tragedy ever took place inside this building, because there were also niches surrounding it where soldiers and archers were placed, ready to hit and strike every lion, every tiger, every leopard that would have dreamt of taking a funny trip onto the first seat. Okay? So, now, shall we have a nice cardio session and step up onto the first See level? those trees? Can you see that? The trees. Basically, that one is a completely artificial park or garden. Do you know why? Because into the bowels of that, into the dark side of it, sorry, I forgot sometimes, carried away by thousands. Anyway, apart from that, into the underground of that hill, he still preserves a complete pavilion belonging to Emperor Nero's golden house. The same one that basically planned in the valley where the Colosseum was built, a specific kind of architecture. Well, basically in this valley, before this huge building was planned, there was an artificial lake. It was called in a kind of with a little bit of modesty, the pond by the emperor. And you see, right in the middle of it, the Colosseum today is right here. Right in the middle of it, there was a barge, a kind of a flat ship that was used sometimes like a kind of a summer house. Okay, later on, when Emperor Nero, as you probably know, took his own life because he committed suicide, Vespasian, that was the later emperor, when rose to power, tried to erase every memory belonging to that emperor. And by doing that, he devoted all this area to fun, to entertainment, to leisure, by planning the Colosseum. And you know, on that side of the valley, actually, he built other facilities that were necessary for staging the shows. For example, when you see those ruins, that kind of walls, preserved wall, in that kind of open area, you can walk around. That one was a big training ground reserved to gladiators. It was called Ludus Magnus. We could translate it like some sort of big school, big barracks, large barracks. Well, basically it was a building where all gladiators coming to Rome from all over the Roman Empire were housed before having their shows, before performing, in order to sleep and train before entering this building. And you know, that building actually was connected to this one by means of an underground tunnel that allowed gladiators to enter this one without being noticed, in order to create a kind of a surprise effect, but also so that we would say today for matters of national security, because gladiators were real celebrities. So imagine a famous sportsman today, like, I don't know, Roger Federer or Rafa Nadal, Cristiano Ronaldo, having a stroll right in the middle of a city without any kind of protection. I would say it would wreak havoc, it would create chaos, literally. Even more if you think that gladiators quite often were wiped out of the sweat that was collected because was considered aphrodisiac, was considered useful for illnesses like epilepsy and so on, and even for matters of fertility. Even the blood was basically collected and sold. There was a pretty flourishing trade about that. And close to that building there was another specific one. There was basically the morgue. And the morgue was intended to receive all the corpses coming out of this building after the games. So hunters, animals, gladiators. And you know what? We're not talking about tens, 50s and so on. We're talking about hundreds, sometimes without exaggerating, even thousands of bodies going out of this building every day. Okay? What these Pisa and marble shows? What do you think?
Something like the gladiators.
A child being taken hand in hand with his own, I don't know, big brother, father, and so on, and holding in the other hand a palm branch. So this suggests us, first of all, that children sometimes were admitted in this building, and secondly, that also they could buy souvenirs on the outside, even though in this case the palm branch was used for a specific reason. You know, up close, for example, applauding in Roman times was not so obvious as you expected it to be today, because not always Romans used clapping flat hands like we do it today. Quite often they stomped their feet on the seat, or snapped their fingers, or even waved their clothes, or even swaying napkins. I don't know if you ever experienced a wedding ceremony in Italy, in Greece, in the Mediterranean. Quite often it is used that way to wave napkins. And one of those, to cheer up, was used also palm branches that were moved and swayed in order to express appreciation. I don't know if you probably know that when Jesus Christ was received in the city of Jerusalem, all the crowd basically cheered up by moving palm branches, right? Right?
Right.
Great. Okay, on the opposite side, I wanted to show you also this fantastic decoration, floor decoration. Was a pretty traditional way of decorating not only floor, but sometimes was used also for walls and even for ceilings in some specific occasions. This was a mosaic, by laying down so tiny pieces, usually of colorful marbles, flint, limestone, glass paste, and so on. And in order to create geometric or figurative designs, in this way, just limestone and flint. But what interests us is that you show a peculiar animal. What kind of animal is this one? Tiger. Where did tiger come from?
Asia.
Asia. Where Asia? Countries.
India.
China or India. So you can imagine how far away, how far-flung that kind of trade route should have been working during Roman times. Well, thanks by means of middlemen, soldiers, and so on that were responsible for bringing those animals here. So that's why they were so expensive. You can see also a kind of a bell necklace, suggesting us that this tiger was probably tamed, was a tame animal. And even more interesting is that here, facing the wild beast, the animal, there were two female hunters. We got pretty short amount of evidence explaining about the involvement of women both as hunters and gladiators. And in this case, I show two hunters, female hunters. They usually fought like gladiators, naked to the waist, and usually coupled against dwarves. I don't know why. Perhaps they believe that they looked more fun that way. But anyway, they lacked any kind of armor compared to the male counterparts. Okay? This gallery was not as open as you see today because it was completely vaulted. Above our heads would have been the seats reserved to the middle class, the third level. You see in the middle is right what the arena stage looked like. Was huge, oval in shape. And actually the shows followed a really specific schedule each day. Early in the morning, there was an initial parade of all the main players, the main gladiators and hunters that were supposed to perform that day, entering the building through the main western gate to your right. Then they entered the arena platform and introduced themselves to spectators. Like, for example, I'm Januarius, I'm a hunter, I'm supposed to hunt for 2 leopards in the morning. Or perhaps I'm Probus, I'm a Mumilon, a kind of gladiator, I'm supposed to fight against Verus, a Retiarus, another kind of gladiator, in the afternoon, and so on. Then in the morning, the fight involving wild animals took place, and usually were chosen specific species against others. For example, was particularly appreciated a lion fighting against a tiger, or for example a bull against a rhino, or an elephant against a lion, a giraffe against 2 leopards, and so on. There were also funny shows, like for example we have an elephant able of jotting down the emperor's name, or for example bears walking on a tightrope like acrobats, and so on. And but I must be honest, they were real massacres. Many exotic animals and domestic animals were slain inside this building during those shows. During the celebrations for a military victory of an emperor at the beginning of the 2nd century, so more or less 1800 years ago, we know that in 100 consecutive days were killed and slain inside this building more or less 10,000 exotic animals only. 100 consecutive days. And just to offer you an idea of how it worked, once an emperor staged in the middle of the arena a kind of a wild and huge hunt, placing trees in order to replicate a jungle, and then allowed all sorts of herbivores to wander around, to roam around, like deer, mostly ostriches, but also, also boars and so on. And they allowed people, like we could have been spectators, to step inside with the permission of capturing and eventually killing with their own bare hands as many ostriches, as many animals as they possibly could, with the permission of taking home what remained of them as a trophy, as a prize. Why all that? Why such a waste of not only animal, but expensive animals such as ours? Why? you know, when we think of these buildings, we should never think of pure leisure like we think it today. All these buildings were specifically intended not just for fun, but for political propaganda. You know the famous quote, panem et circenses, that literally meant a lot of bread and shows into the circus, referring to the fact that during those shows, everybody could have been admitted to attending the shows for free, and above all, there were free distribution of food, in order to gain consensus, to have spectators forgetting about real problems of everyday life, like lack of jobs, lack of money, lack of food, and so on. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? At least about Italy I can speak of. Anyway, apart from that, so it was incredibly important to show off those animals, basically so incredibly exotic, because, you know, Romans wouldn't have been so easy for the Romans like it is for us just by going to a zoo to see those exotic animals. And above all, you should imagine that when those shows were staged, there was not just sand covering the arena, but were replicated fake environments and settings to which those animals belonged. So imagine how exciting it must have been for a Roman to experience a weird, long-necked animal like a giraffe be trotting in the middle of replicated savannah. By the way, do you know how the Romans called a giraffe? Camelopards, because they believed they were halfway between a camel and a leopard because of the skin. And also imagine also a big striped cat lurking in the middle of the jungle, or a huge lizard like a Nile crocodile be reeling in the middle of a pond. Must have been a hell of a show. Above all, if you think how those animals were brought up to the arena stage. How do you think they were brought up to the arena? Through a clever system of lifts and elevators. I don't know, if you noticed that kind of a wooden fence just in front of you, can you see that properly? Just in front of you? Yes? Okay, so you should imagine that when this building was inaugurated, into the underground, this amazing, sorry, the words, in this maze of corridor, basically into the underground, was specifically designed to drag around, to thrust animals, people, staff, machines all together, and to lift them up to the arena stage with a clever system of lifts and elevators like this one. It has been estimated that at the beginning, when the building was inaugurated, there were 28 of those lifts, each one operated by 8 men, propelling the cage and spinning the central wooden pole around in order to have the cage lifted up. And each cage could contain up to 300 kilograms, so small to medium-sized animals, while the large-sized animals were pulled in through the main eastern gate: elephants, zebras, horses, camels, and rhinos, hippos, and so on. So, with 28 of those trappers opening and bending down right above each lift, the animal could jump on them like inclined ramp and appear suddenly, as if by magic, on top of the arena. And excellent, the incredibly exciting thing was that the hunter wouldn't know where the next animal was supposed to pop out from. Okay, so that must have been a hell of a show for those times. Later on in time, when all the building was refurbed, what basically were planned and set up 60, as many as 60 of those lifts and elevators peppering the arena all the way around and opening at different times. Okay? Basically got to an end, and then we reached the break that took place at midday. At midday, usually there were ballets and also dances and so on, and also there were free sprinkling of perfumes, flower petals all the way around, a mist of saffron and so on. And there were also free delivery of food. You should visualize stewards going all around the benches carrying trays of pastries, dates, wine and bread. And then there were also kind of clay balls and clay terracotta balls that were thrown at spectators or left to fall from above. The works like kind of tokens representing prizes to be collected at the exit. And we're talking about, for example, a jug of wine or a loaf of bread, some sort of amount of money, and sometimes even slaves that, if you think about it, after all, were considered objects. So they were disposable material effects. Okay? And to spice up the mood a little bit, perhaps I should do the same thing now, there were also public executions. So war criminals and also deserters were prisoners also, were sentenced to death, to be mauled, to be mangled by wild animals, but also by being beaten to death, by being burnt alive. This kind of sentence was called sentence to the beasts, to the animals. And sometimes they were staged, even theatrically, in creating some sort of shows that would be more appealing and more, I should say, perhaps, to spectators. But actually there were also, you can't believe it, funny shows. For example, well, apart from this kind of shows, at some point we know that an emperor discovered that his own wife was swindled, was cheated by a merchant, pretending to sell her crystal jewels that at the end turned out to be made out of glass. So the emperor decided to punish that merchant by facing a lion in the middle of the arena. So you can imagine at midday, well, basically this poor merchant standing right in the middle of the arena, all alone, perhaps trembling or soaking his pants, because I can imagine it was not such a funny show to face a lion, and with 80,000 people, well, falling in silence, awaiting where the next noise would appear from. The next trapdoor would bend down to let the lion appear. Perhaps also trying to visualize it, some tumbleweeds, well, basically rolling across the dusty arena, and perhaps also the soundtrack, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But anyway, I'm mixing things. Anyway, and then at some point, well, basically a trapdoor bent down, and what came out, what popped out, was a chicken. So you can imagine 80,000 people bursting in laugh because the emperor got a pretty good sense of humor. And so how he was cheated, well, his wife was cheated by the merchant, he wanted to cheat him in turn. And luckily for the merchant, he was able to go up to the building, still on his feet and not chopped out or eaten by an animal. Okay? So after all of that, allow me, was digested, in the afternoon, the peak of the shows, long-awaited shows, took place. The fights involving gladiators. You know, usually those fights took place as 2, 3, 4, sometimes even 5 duels, taking place in the middle of the arena with only sand covering it this time. And you know, gladiators actually were chosen among 16 different kind of warriors, according to the equipment they were fitted out with, they were provided with. Among them, for example, I'm sure you have seen it, the most iconic one was the Retiarius, the netman. He looked, as you can see, like a kind of a fisherman. He was equipped with what? Huh? Yeah, with, well, first of all, a net that was weighted in order to trap the opponent. Then also with a pitchfork, like a sort of trident and a small sickle. And can you notice something? It was the only gladiator lacking any kind of heavy armor. Do you know why? Can you guess why?
Move faster.
Pardon?
Move faster.
Because he had to be extremely quick to chase for his opponents that on the other side were heavily armored, like the Contra Retiarius or even the Murmillo. They were equipped like a soldier. It has been estimated that they were forced to wear up to 25 kilograms of armor. So starting with this kind of helmets that consisted of leather inside and bronze outside, was pretty heavy, between 5 and 7 kilograms, sometimes only with eye sockets left open or even with a grate. You know, quite often a gladiator was easily killed because it couldn't endure an heat wave outside, imagine early in the afternoon, with 25 kilograms of armor above in the middle of summer. So it could collapse pretty easily. And then you got a soldier's like heavy rectangular shield. And what about the sword? The sword was called gladius. That's where the name gladiator came from, actually. And it was equipped also, this one, with a specific kind of helmet. You see, with a almost smooth crest right above. Can you guess what?
Sword would just come off the side.
Pardon?
Sword would slip off the side of it.
In order not to be easily trapped by the netman, the net. And What about this one? This one actually was one of my favorites because it had to be incredibly skilled. It was the Thracian by the region in northern Greece, and it was equipped with a small round or rectangular shield and with a pointed curved sword, pretty similar to the Arabic scimitar. Have you ever seen a scimitar? You know, actually this one works exactly in the opposite way like a scimitar. The scimitar is supposed to cut through. This one was supposed to pierce from above the heavy and long shield of a murmillo. And there were also other kind of fighters like the Diplomachus with a spear, and also the Scissor with a blade cutting through the netman and the net. And then there was also the one with two swords, one who fought on horse, and so on. But actually, they were gladiators after all. They were criminals, or were war prisoners who at some point had been captured, enslaved, and to whom was offered the chance by the manager who hired them to get free again if, only if, they had managed to fight for 10 long years in the middle of the arena. Of course, you understand, if they managed to stay alive. Usually a gladiator did not survive more than a couple of fights. They usually last 10 to 15 minutes. And, but contrary to what you may think, rarely a gladiator was killed in the arena on purpose just to indulge the emperor's whim. You know the famous gesture, thumb up, thumb down, and so on. It's a complete fake because of the bad interpretation of a painter during the 18th century, thinking that that was the way. Actually, the gesture was this one, horizontally placed, mimicking slit his throat, jugular, or this one, mimicking the honorable way for a soldier to be killed by inserting the blade into the back of his neck. And as I said, usually, rarely a gladiator was killed unless he fought cowardly. Usually when he realized he was about to be defeated, he knelt down, put down his own weapons, and raised his right forefinger, asking for mercy. A mercy that was usually granted. Do you know why? Why not to kill a gladiator at the end? Why? Yeah. Or what drives the world? Because gladiators, after all, were incredibly expensive. You know, a low skill, think of the amount of energy, time, and money, food that was spent in training a gladiator. The more skilled a gladiator was, much more expensive it was supposed to be. You know, a low-skilled gladiator could be worth between 10 and 50,000 euros. And a highly skilled gladiator could be worth up to 200, 250,000 euros. So quite often, gladiators were awarded, were spared their life. And, you know, actually, quite rarely they were killed. And we know gladiators actually managed to work and to fight for a pretty long amount of time. For example, we have some gladiator called Stirpius that managed to win 107 times in a 20 years long career. It was a Murmillo or a Retiarus called Probus that fought 99 times and won. You know, the gladiators, they actually, at the end, got free again, usually become doctores, teachers, trainers of other gladiators into the gladiatorial school. And quite often they were hired by wealthy brokers and even by emperors to become their own trainers and even their personal bodyguards. And you know what? Quite often they ended up in murdering the emperor himself, like in the case of Commodus. I don't know if you watched the movie The Gladiator, perhaps you're a bit younger, but I watched it 47 times. And I know, I've got nothing better to do, I know that. And it was even before the pandemic, so I've got no excuse. But anyway, apart from that, Commodus, the emperor, in the movie, was killed by a gladiator. That was true, but not in the arena. Although the emperor was used to step down into the arena, something that was dishonorable for a free man. Basically, he loved to fight as a gladiator, so much that rumors had it that basically was the legitimate son of the emperor's wife, the empress, with a gladiator, but probably it was not true. But he was killed by a gladiator in his own bedchamber by being poisoned. You know, usually 82% of emperors didn't die with a natural death, or were killed, either by being poisoned, being murdered, and so on. So it was not an easy life as is expected. Okay.
If you guys see there, that's a menorah inside the arch here, which showcases that this particular Arch of Triumph is over the Jewish rebellion in which the Temple of Jerusalem was destroyed and the Jewish diaspora began.
I wanted to show you perhaps the best preserved temple in the Roman Forum, the Temple of Dios, Antoninus and Faustina. Basically this massive temple. Oh, by the way, do you know the difference between a Greek and a Roman temple? I'll show you how. What's the most apparent difference you can see between a Greek temple right above and a Roman temple right below? Pardon? Huh? No, that's relevant. Well, the first one is columns. You can see in a Greek temple, they are standing all the way around the internal chamber. When in the Roman temple, they're just across the front side and with a few more along the longer ones. And also the platform those columns were standing on. So in the Greek temple, it was shallower, consisting of 2 or 3 steps, while in the Roman ones, it was almost a podium, a higher platform, supposed almost to symbolically push the temple to heaven, so connect the god statues to the god himself. And in this case, there was also a massive staircase leading to the proper chamber. Well, of course, what you see is a modern replica, and there was also the altar right in the middle of it. In this case, you can see how the platform, the podium, showed the same amount of holes you may have seen in the Colosseum, basically carried out and performed for the same reason, to quarry off all the iron pegs and clamps that kept those blocks together. And what can you read right above this building? Come on guys, a few more minutes and then we're over. It's not easy always for me, all years melting down, so you know, and it's always for me, it's difficult to keep concentrating. You know, this building first was dedicated to the emperor's wife, Faustina, and was cut down the second line, Divae Faustina ex SC, meaning to the deified Faustina by decree of the Senate, ex Senatus Consultum. And Faustina was the empress, the emperor's wife. But 20 years later, even the emperor died. You know, sometimes even the emperors died. And so the first line was completely scraped off of its decoration and was added Divo Antonino et, to the deified Antoninus et, so to the emperor Antoninus. But why this building is so well preserved compared to the other ones? If you look around, you can see how they are standing just a few chunks of columns, some architraves, some pieces of marble. Why this one is so well preserved? Huh? Yeah. What if you see what's standing right on top of it?
The cross.
A cross. So it was transformed into a church, like many of these buildings. It was a way, you know, of almost by the Pope of gaining possession of pagan buildings at that time. It was built a proper church inside. And before getting to that, can you see those kind of ridges right above those columns? You know, those columns are between 15 and 17 meters high, consisting of one single piece of marble coming from an island in central Greece. That was called Carystian green. We in Italian call it cipollino, onionish, because when it's sewn off, it gives the impression of an onion slice. And what about those ridges right above them? Why they are there? Why?
Tables there on them.
Yes.
Rotate them.
Because, you know, during the 1500s, like for many other buildings inside the Roman Forum, basically the Pope tried to topple them, to pull them down in order to recycle them in St. Paul Cathedral, in St. Peter's Basilica. But luckily for us, it didn't succeed because it was kind of, you know, wedged in between the interpretor and the architraves, and so they are still standing, luckily for us. But one more question. When was built the church in the middle of that temple, what was supposed to be the internal chamber, like the one we have seen for the Temple of Venus in Rome? Why the entrance was so high. How did they manage to reach that door?
Were you not supposed to go in?
There were no stairs, there were no ladders, they got no wings, there were no Spider-Mans.
Back door?
Huh? There is a back door, but that one was the main door. They didn't climb one on top of the other to reach the entrance.
In a bridge.
There was no bridge. What was the trick?
They were catapulted in.
Oh, pardon? Look,
I think they were catapulted.
how did they manage to get to attend mass every Sunday or so on?
No, I think they were sitting on them and travel from east to west. No?
You know, because the floor level was that high at that time. All of what you see today was completely covered by mud, by soil. So much was more or less 6-8 meters above our heads. And all this area, the Roman Forum, the Middle Ages and Renaissance period, was called the cattle fields, because cattle was usually left here to graze and browse freely. And then later on, with the further excavations, they went down and discovered also the flight of steps, and so on. Okay?
There you see Caesar's tomb. And what's around me right now that I'm going to show you guys is the original plaza of the Forum. Everything else was added afterwards. After a long 2-hour tour in the sun of the Colosseum and the Forum, we just got done having our second gelato of the day and walking by the wedding cake monument up top there, and then these trees. Many of y'all that haven't been here may be fascinated to know about these trees. First, you're not gonna believe me when I tell you this, but those are pine trees, but they are just regional. You can't find them really anywhere else in the world. They are umbrella pine trees. That was something that we learned on our first trip to Rome, and we were just amazed by that. Last dinner of the trip, and we got ourselves a garden salad to start. Yay, here's the dinner. We got a pizza. We got a pizza with a spicy salami, and we got a margarita pizza. So half and half. What's dinner without a little street side music? One of the employees coming out with an accordion, getting it.
This distinctive voice.
One final gelato for the trip to end with for dessert tonight. That'll do it for our last full day in Rome today. Another jam-packed day just like yesterday. We're back at the hotel. We're pretty much all packed up and ready to come home tomorrow. We are hot. We are sweaty. We are tired. This has been a fantastic trip. Overall, it's memories that will definitely last a lifetime. We've made new friends that hopefully will also last a lifetime. We're definitely going to miss our Colorado crew when they head back on their own separate way tomorrow at the airport. But I think most of us were ready to get back home and get to see our families after about a week and a half away. So all in all, fantastic day. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. We'll see you tomorrow for the journey home.
Coming to you live from the Colorado crew, we had the best last day here in Rome. And we are so sad to leave the Georgia crew.
And we have one last question.
What is your why?